Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we complete a 5-day program on the inner work of age. Over this past week, we've been delving into the various dimensions of aging in a world in which the demographic shows that our human population is simultaneously getting younger and younger and older, depending on where you are, all at the same time. There are many challenges at all ages. There's challenges when we're newly born. There's challenges when we're in our adolescence. There's challenges when we're housekeepers and professionals, and there's challenges as we age. But particularly in the Western world, we don't attune ourselves to aging because of the emphasis on the young. So this week, we've been really looking at the extraordinary opportunities for people as they age. And not only the opportunities for personal growth, but the opportunities for a contribution in a world, as we all know, that is spinning out of control through climate change, through war, through economic and financial and political instability. So we're at a moment in human history, I would say, when it's all hands on deck, when all the generations have to come together in a very intentional way to save humanity from itself as it teeters on the brink, quite literally, of self-destruction. So that is our topic for Humanity Rising generally. And this week, we're focusing on the contributions of those of us who are aging. And today, we're going to delve into what the spiritual traditions around the world advise us as we enter into older age and more maturity. Before we dive into this very deep and complex domain, let us pause as we always do as we begin our Humanity Rising sessions and just breathe together. And the breathing that we do is coherent breathing. You'll see an art card, which is actually the picture of the combined orbital pathways of the Earth and the planet Venus around the sun. It creates a 5-pointed star. And the breathing that we do is to the count of 5. You'll hear a bell. Just breathe in very slowly. Then for 5.5 seconds, then you'll hear another bell, and then exhale for about 5.5 seconds. If you do this, you take 5.5 breaths per minute, and you take in 5.5 liters of air. According to ancient traditions and according to modern science, this form of coherent breathing optimizes your body and brings coherence to your entire body systems more quickly and more effectively than any other breathing technique that's known. So that's how we enter our programs together, by just breathing together. We're going to do 10 breaths, and then we're going to begin our program. Thank you all so much. Let us breathe. Thank you, everyone. It's always good to become coherent at the beginning of our broadcasts in the spirit of what Plotinus said over 2,000 years ago, that the whole universe breathes together. In that spirit, I want to welcome all of you again and appreciate Connie Zweig, who has been the convener of this week, having completed an extraordinarily well-received course at Ubiquity University, the sponsor of Humanity Rising, on shadow work. She's an analyst who has delved very deeply into the shadow and written a number of best-selling books on the shadow, meeting the shadow, romancing the shadow, and meeting the spiritual shadow of ourselves as well. And now her most recent book is The Inner Work of Age, and she's convened this entire 5-day program. So Connie, I really want to appreciate all you've done to support and build Humanity Rising with these very deep and inspiring sessions. And I turn the program over to you with deep thanks.
Jim, all back to you. Couldn't have done it without you. And Georg, our Zoom wizard, thank you behind the scenes. Thank you both so much. And thank you to everyone who's joining us today, wherever you are in the world, to explore the spiritual purpose of age with a number of renowned teachers. So as we learn the inner work of age, we find that there are practices, both psychological and spiritual practices, that address the timeless question, who am I? And we deepen our self-knowledge and we reimagine age for ourselves, shifting from denial to awareness, from self-rejection to self-acceptance, from obligation to flow, from holding on to letting go, and from role to soul. This is a phrase I borrowed from Ram Dass because it so beautifully describes this internal shift of identification from what we do to who we really are. And this is the deeper dimension of age that even includes the unfolding of spiritual awakening or advanced stages of consciousness that are described in every religious and spiritual tradition as the purpose of late life. So this expansion of awareness is not about what we do or don't do. More work, more volunteering, less work, less volunteering. It's about how we do it, the internal state of mind that arises as we shift our identity from what we do to who we are. And for some, this deepening identification with our spiritual nature can expand to non-dual awareness, the direct experience of the interconnectedness of all things. So this spiritual purpose of age will be addressed now by spiritual elders from many traditions. Let me open with a story. This is a Chinese parable. There was a great drought. For months, there had not been a drop of rain, and the situation became catastrophic. The Catholics made processions. The Protestants made prayers. The Chinese burned joss sticks and shot off guns to frighten away the demons of the drought. No result. Finally, the Chinese said, "We'll fetch the rainmaker." And from another province, a dried up old man appeared. The only thing he asked for was a quiet little house, and he locked himself in for 3 days. On the 4th day, the clouds gathered, and there was a great snowstorm. The town was so full of rumors about the rainmaker that a visitor went to ask the man how he had done it. "They call you the rainmaker. Will you tell me how you made the snow?" The man responded, "I didn't make the snow. I'm not responsible." "But what have you done these 3 days?" "I can explain that. I come from another country where things are in order. Here, they're out of order. They're not as they should be. So the whole country is not in Tao. And I'm not in the natural order of things because I'm in a disordered country. So I had to wait 3 days until I was back in Tao, and then naturally the rain came. This was a story told to Carl Jung by Richard Wilhelm in The Secret of the Golden Flower. So that's this tale of a world without water and a wise man who brings rain is not a tale of heroic feats. He's not running around seeking solutions, trying to fix the problem on the same level as the problem. He's not trying to change people's beliefs. He's not doing magical ritual to wrestle with demons. The rainmaker knows that no amount of action will create a connection to the waters of life. Rather, this is a tale of a spiritual elder as tuning fork, a man aligning with something greater, here called the Tao, so that the world can come back into harmony. This story offers us a vision of the elder who looks within, recognizes when he's out of the Tao, and knows how to return to it. The rainmaker feels the disturbance of the force inside himself. He feels it in the world that he's visiting, and he knows he's not separate from the dry, broken world. He becomes aligned with the source, and nature responds. So his inner work is not separate from his outer work. As he heals his own soul, he heals the soul of the world. All of these perennial traditions refer to late life as the time to focus on this transition and fulfill the promise of spiritual development. The images of the sannyasin in India, or the monk in the Christian monastery, or in the Buddhist monastery, these images communicate the potential of letting go of past identities and roles and meanings, and connecting to something larger than ego, something beyond ourselves. As householders, we can use aging as a natural monastery, allowing our sensory diminishments and physical limits to lead us within. We can allow natural slowing to open out into an altered sense of time, breath by breath. We can allow our losses to lead us to deeper compassion for the suffering of others. We can allow the body and mind's decline to lead us to let go of our personal story, feelings, and beliefs, and practice non-attachment as part of the soul's journey, breath by breath. Finally, as aging alters our awareness and our experience of the world, we awaken to a deeper identity. We're not our bodies, we're not our minds, we're not our stories. We see through our thoughts and drop into the soul's point of view, and the world is no longer separate from us. As the Hindu scriptures say, I am that, thou art that, all this is that. We're aging into awakening. Now I invite you to listen to a stellar lineup of teachers about this spiritual purpose of age. We're going to begin with introducing Roshi Joan Halifax. Roshi Joan is a Buddhist teacher, founder of Upaya Zen Center in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Roshi Joan, you can turn on your video if you want. She's a social activist and author of The Human Encounter with Death with Stan Groff, The Fruitful Darkness, A Journey Through Buddhist Practice, Simplicity in the Complex, A Buddhist Life in America, Being with Dying, Cultivating Compassion and Wisdom in the Presence of Death, Standing at the Edge, Finding Freedom Where Fear and Courage Meet. She's a pioneer in end-of-life care and director of the Project on Being with Dying, founder of Upaya Prison Project, that develops programs on meditation for prisoners. And she's also founder of the Nomads Clinic in Nepal. Roshi Joan, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Connie, so much. I'd like to begin my talk with some words I recently encountered from Catherine McKenna that really was like an arrow to the heart. I could relate, in other words. And Catherine writes, "Now, every time I witness a strong person, I want to know, what darkness did you conquer in your story? Mountains do not rise without earthquakes." I think we're in a time of earthquakes, and we're also in a time of rising mountains. And one of the things that really has touched me in the recent past has been the presence of my good friend, Joanna Macy, who, yes, spends deep time on her contemplative life, but actually seems to have slowed down not at all. So, I think there are many models of spiritual aging. Now, many years ago, this was in the early 1970s, my ex-husband and I visited the Insight Meditation Society to spend some time with Jack Kornfield, Joseph Goldstein, and Sharon Salzberg. And I asked Sharon at that time what practice she did. I was a Zen person and interested in other aspects of Buddhism. And she described this practice of the Brahma Viharas, these 4 boundless abodes of loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. And honestly, I thought it was too nice. You will forgive me, but that's just my nature. And Sharon said to me, just do it. It will change your life. And I think she was right about it. In Zen, we could say that these qualities are implicit in our practice, but not explicitly articulated. But there are practices that develop what I've come to know through Kaz Tanahashi and my teacher, Roshi Bernie Glassman, as Robai Shin, grandmother's heart. So I think I've been a bit of a failure at these practices, but I do keep returning to them. And most importantly is this practice of equanimity. My idea of equanimity, I think, was distorted, was really incorrect. It was, about being sort of calm in the midst of everything. And I have to say, I learned a lot from my teacher, Roshi Bernie Glassman, as we sat, and Enkyo Roshi was there, and Peter Matheson, and so many people. We sat in the charnel grounds of Auschwitz. And in observing and sensing into Bernie, I came to this sensibility of what it is to be an unshakable presence in the midst of a grotesque and cruel history that was hard for even me to imagine, who has seen a lot of bad stuff. And that time in Auschwitz really turned my life inside out. And I'll say a little bit more how that worked, but just to touch into the word equanimity, or in Sanskrit or Pali rather, upekkha, it literally means to look over. As someone who loves to hike in the high mountains, I know this feeling of looking over, what it is to be suspended or above the fray, so to speak. And age can give us that, particularly if we've worked our story, so to speak, particularly as we have not bypassed what we've learned from the earthquakes of our own maturation process. And I feel like in the polarized conditions of our current world, it's pretty challenging for most of us to maintain our balance and a good heart. There's so much negativity, so much uncertainty, and so much moral outrage. And I like the words of Ehe Dogen in this fray that we find ourselves in. He said, you can understand all of Buddhism, but you cannot go beyond your abilities and your intelligence unless you have reimagine, grandmother's heart, the heart-mind of great compassion. Now, I was just in Dharamsala, like Bob was. How's your jet lag doing, Bob? He's there. He's coming up, but I'm still in the jet lag. My body doesn't adjust to these time changes like it used to. But one of the powerful things that I witnessed in Dharamsala, in this interaction between His Holiness the Dalai Lama and a young social activist, Rowan from Ireland, who was part of Extinction Rebellion, was when Rowan had an outburst, really powerful outburst, basically saying, Your Holiness, you're not in the grassroots with us. You're not in the midst of suffering. I mean, what are you saying? 7 billion, 8 billion people, one humanity. And, he's saying, if the Taliban is holding the gun to a young woman's head because she wants an education, that's what we're facing as young people. And I watched His Holiness maintain equanimity, number one. And number two, toward the end, he delivered in a kind of reimagine way, this beautiful treasure. Rowan was asking, what can you tell us to do? And His Holiness said this. He said, cultivate an altruistic heart. And he didn't mean this in a superficial way. He meant it truly. What it means to live your life in the deep spirit and actualization of benefiting others. Now, His Holiness is this world religious leader, elderly indeed, 87. But in the lore of reimagine, in my tradition, reimagine is that old woman standing by the side of the road selling tea cakes in early China. She's that person of no rank, having no interest in worldly power. And the worldly dharmas don't touch her. She's not into praise and blame. She has no credibility, and she doesn't want any, and she doesn't need any. And she, in fact, has been basically overlooked, and she overlooks. She has equanimity, but she also has a heart made fierce and brave by adversity. Again, going back, mountains do not rise without earthquakes. So just finishing up this riff on being an elder, I think it is true for most of us who have hit a venerable age. I turned 80 this summer. And, the body has its own agenda. I'm glad that I've spent my years in the mountains, but also I wasn't actually a good friend to the body. But fundamentally, I haven't abandoned it. And the reason is that I recognize the importance of actually taking care of the stuff of my life, including this cloak of the body, so that I have a little more time, hopefully, on this planet to serve, to learn, and to dance through a few more earthquakes. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. Thank you so much. The altruistic heart and living the earthquake so that the mountains can rise, and seeing from above, all beautiful teachings. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to introduce Robert Jonas, who goes by Jonas. He is a mystical Christian teacher and director of Empty Bell, a contemplative sanctuary in Massachusetts that's a resource for contemplative Christian and for Buddhist Christian dialogue. Trained as a therapist, Jonas is a retreat leader, author, video artist, musician, and environmental steward. A Christian in the Carmelite tradition, he received spiritual formation from Buddhist teachers as well. He's author of Essential Henry Nouwen and a new book, My Dear Far Nearness, The Holy Trinity as Spiritual Practice. He's a student of shakuhachi, the Japanese bamboo flute, which I've heard him play with great delight. And he's played at Buddhist Christian retreats with the Dalai Lama. Thank you, Jonas, so much for coming.
Thank you, Connie. Thank you. And thank you, Jim, too, for your introduction and the breathing exercise. Connie, I'm so glad to be with all of you. It's a real honor to be here with so many folks in my generation. I'm 75, who are making this journey together. And I want to share a couple of stories. So I have this shakuhachi, Japanese bamboo flute. And it's interesting that I would pick this up as I age. Picked it up when I was 45 years old. So I've been playing it for those 30 years. And I grew up in northern Wisconsin as a Lutheran. I then discovered Buddhism and St. John of the Cross, the mystical tradition in the 70s. And in the 90s, I was in seminary in a Jesuit institution, and the teaching fellow got up and he played the shakuhachi. And I was so taken with this instrument that I began to take lessons. One of the things I do when I lead retreats is I bring the shakuhachi with me and I tell stories. One story I can tell you is I sometimes play at Hiroshima memorials here in Western Massachusetts. And there's a piece that I learned in what's called the Hokkyoku tradition, which is music from the origin. You may know this name in Zen Buddhism, shunyata, emptiness. Emptiness is actually fullness. And there's this Latin phrase that I love in the mystical Christian tradition of coincidentia oppositorum, the coincidence of all opposites. And I think of that when I think of the shakuhachi because my father was a tail gunner in the Pacific fighting the Japanese. And when I was young, I had a Marine Corps uniform. So it's one of these, I would say, magnificent and also painful ironies that I would learn Japanese Zen and shakuhachi when my father was out there at war with the Japanese. And I think of it as kind of something we're all doing as we get older is going spelunking into our history. So it's been a healing moment for me to be with Yoshio Kurahashi in Kyoto, playing the shakuhachi. So here's a piece, very short, that I'll play for you called Kojo no Tsuki. Kojo no Tsuki means moon, well, one translation, moon over the ruined castle. And this is a tune that is often played in Japan following wars, when people are mourning and in great distress about how are we going to recover, will we recover? And of course, it's war and death, suffering are come with the territory when we're aging. So I'll play this little piece. And something to reflect on here is that when the Enola Gay bomber dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima, they were 31,000 feet above the city. And the bomb actually blew up 2,000 feet over the city, not actually on the ground. and it just wiped out hundreds of thousands of people. And in the moment that they released that bomb from the Enola Gay, there were 43 seconds before it blew up. And all those people who were having a normal morning, quote, normal morning, were killed instantly. And I think of that moment because none of us know how long we have to live. Maybe we have 43 seconds, maybe we have another 10 years or whatever, but it's coming. The bomb of life and death is exploding over us. And with all the suffering that have been, Roshi Joan noticed, and Connie and Jim, these terrible things are happening. How are we going to breathe into this atmosphere of danger? So here's Kojo no Tsuki. So God bless all those folks who were killed on that day. And I want to say that as someone who's been involved in the Buddhist-Christian dialogue for decades, really, I found a universal way to navigate these traditions. So when I hear the Zen Buddhist word shunyata, emptiness, I have the experience that Christians call kenosis, the self-emptying of Christ. Or when I hear Choyam Trungpa, the great Shambhala teacher, who described our situation in this way, he said, "The bad news is that we're falling." I know many of you know this story. The bad news is that we're falling, but the good news is that there's no bottom. And for me as a Christian, there is no bottom. There is an invisible bottom, which is love. Which is love. In our scriptures, God is love. That's the bottom line. We're made in the image and likeness of God, who is love. And so I will share one more experience. I was diagnosed with prostate cancer 8 years ago. So I'm 8 years out. Thank God I'm still here. Very serious. I had Gleason 9. Some of you men know about how this works. Gleason 10 means you're basically on your way out. You're going to die soon, probably, unless something miraculous happens. So I was Gleason 9. I was at Dana-Farber every day for almost 3 months, daily radiation, 5 days a week. And something rather miraculous happened for me there. There's so much, when we go to the hospitals, when we're older, we're all going to be in hospitals. There are a lot of machines, there's a lot of doing rather than being, and there's a lot of technical language. I was surrounded by first thing that happens in Boston at Dana-Farber, you take off all your clothes, you put on a gown, You've already got tattoos on your body where the radiation should go. And then you go into another room where there are huge machines, they surround you, and the radiation's coming in. And what happened to me on that table every day for about 10 minutes of radiation is I had to trust the engineers and all the medical people. My life was at stake. So I was looking at the big question that Connie mentioned: who am I? What is my life all about? And what happened on about, I would say, the first or second week is I would pray, not to be rid of cancer, but to pray that I would be in the presence of love with this cancer, and trusting the medical team and so on and so forth. And the prayer that came to me was, burn away everything that is not love. Burn away everything that is not love. I don't care about anything else. I don't care what people think. I don't care what I've accomplished. I don't care what I'm worried about at this moment. All I care about is this clear field of love. I want to live there. I want to live there with others. And in the Christian tradition, that living there with others in love is the ancient tradition is called perichoresis, which is a dance around of love. The theologians who put the Nicene Creed together, which I never knew this interpretation when I grew up, called God a dance around of love, the perichoresis. Circumincessio, there's so many Latin words that describe what Thich Nhat Hanh called interbeing. When we're in that field of presence, everyone has a deep experience of ultimate love. Burn away everything that is not love. So there's a couple stories to share. My experience with the shakuhachi and the war between America and the Japanese, and the goodness and the beauty of the Americans and the Japanese, and the love. So I'm very grateful to be with you. Blessings.
Thank you, Jonas. That's so beautiful. Sounds in a way like you were making reparations for your father.
Yeah.
And the practice that you discovered on the hospital bed is really a universal practice for all of us. Burn away everything that is not love. It's a mantra. Beautiful. Thank you so much. So next I'm going to introduce Dale Borglum. Dale founded and directed the Hanuman Foundation Dying Center in Santa Fe. Dale, you can turn on your video. This is the first residential facility in the States to support conscious dying. Working with Ram Dass and Stephen Levine, Dale helped found the conscious dying movement. And he's been executive director of the Living Dying Project since 1986 in Santa Fe and in the Bay Area. He's co-author with Ram Dass and others of The Journey of Awakening, the Meditator's Guidebook, and has taught meditation since 1974. He gives workshops on meditation, healing, and spiritual support for those with life-threatening illness, and on caregiving as spiritual practice. Welcome, Dale. I'm just meeting you today, so thank you for coming. I think you're muted. Can't hear you. Okay, we can't hear you. Georg, nope, that's any suggestion, Georg?
Dale, you seem unmuted.
Yes.
And before we heard you fine in the prep room. So let's see if maybe the connection, or if you select the microphone.
There we go. I can hear you.
Now?
Yes.
I didn't even do anything. I don't know what happened there.
Thank you.
Sorry for the confusion. So I'm supposed to be talking about Vedanta, which I don't know too much about, but I'm going to plunge in anyway. In India, they have the 4 stations of life. From 0 to 20, you're a student. You're taken care of by the householders. Householders are 20 to 40. They earn money. They support society.
40 to 60, you begin to study the scriptures, you pull back from being so busy. And 60 to 80, you are then a renunciate, and that your whole life is about practice. Both Joan and I are past 80 now, so they don't even tell us what we're supposed to be doing after we get beyond 80. But in looking at this transition from being a student to being a householder to being a practitioner of the Dharma to being a total renunciate, it really is, in a sense, how we're preparing to be an elder, to be an aging person. And in my experience, there's really two directions we're looking at the same time. In one direction, we're looking at the fact that we're going to die. Trungpa Rinpoche said, until we come into intimate contact with death, our spiritual practice will have the quality of us being a dilettante. So that you can meditate till your knees fall off, but until you know in the depth of your bones that you're going to die, you can use meditation or prayer to become a more efficient personality, a better person. But that radical transformation, that radical surrender into wholeness will not be happening. And I, as Connie mentioned, I run the Living Dying Project. I've been at the bedside of so many people who have died. And it's a very different experience being at the bedside of somebody who's dying, who has done their preparation, who has taken spiritual practice beyond being a dilettante and surrendered so deeply into love that dying is another moment of that living, as compared to someone who is still holding on to, trying to push death away. I remember so many people who are putting makeup on the day they're dying so that the people who are coming can see them at their best, if you will. Walt Whitman said, sometimes touching another human being is almost more than I can bear. You've had that experience, I've had that experience, but so often we get lost in all the stuff of life. Thomas Merton said, love and prayer are learned in the hour when prayer becomes impossible and the heart turns to stone. So as we're aging, this ability to touch more deeply the other human beings around us, to open our hearts even when life, our life, the life around us is out of control, is really what's being asked to prepare us to die. And on the other hand, looking back into life to allow us to be more compassionate towards those around us. Compassion has certain defining qualities. One of them is connectedness, a heart that's connected to your own heart, to the people around you, and to God. And for me, aging forces me to look at what obscures my heart, wanting to be more connected with myself, more connected with Maharaji, with Christ, with Buddha, more connected with all the beings around me. So using life to deepen the qualities of love, initially we reach out kind of in the way that Robert was talking about. We reach out asking God to appear. Eventually there's this relational quality of devotion and compassion. And then in Hinduism and in Buddhism, we can begin to talk about tantric love, tantric devotion, where instead of the deity being something that's only outside, only external, it becomes revealed that it is our own true nature, that we're not praying to something outside that's doing something to us or for us. So that imagine you're saying a mantra. In the beginning, you're asking God to show up. And then God shows up, and the lovely poems of Rumi and Hafiz and other people are talking about that very juicy relationship. And in this spaciousness of the heart, it becomes revealed that God is also our own true nature. And that as we say the mantra, each time we say the word or the phrase, that is God itself. There's a wonderful Hindu saint, Namdev, who says the whole universe is densely permeated with the name. So that when I say Ram or Om Mani Padme Hum, when I say the word, the name, that it's not pointing at something, it's not a vehicle, it's not a tool, it is the full expression. And that he, she who is saying it, the sound, and the essential quality of the name are all the same thing. So that this is dying into that wholeness, and wholeness is what we die into. So these days, there's so much talk out there about non-duality. Eckhart Tolle, Ramana Maharshi, Adyashanti, many other people, of course. And that non-duality, in my humble opinion and the opinion of many great saints, is what we die into. So as we're aging, can we be practicing this surrender into wholeness, selfless acceptance of the nature of things? Kala Rinpoche, who I know is not from the Vedanta tradition, said, "You live in illusion in the appearance of things. There is a reality. You are that reality. When you realize this, you understand that you are nothing. And being nothing, you are everything. That is all." So that aging is about understanding the selflessness of who we truly are, of preparing to die, and at the same time becoming so empty that we can turn back into life and be a force for compassion, an activist, grandmother in the way that Joan was talking about, that soft love that accepts everything. The Living Dying Project trains people to be at the bedsides of people who are dying. And I really find that without this relationship with death, one can practice and practice, and it still doesn't get to the depth, just in the way that Robert was talking about being on that radiation table. So I really would encourage anybody, even elders, particularly elders, to, whenever you have the chance, to have an intimate relationship with death, an intimate relationship with that in us that doesn't die. Thank you all so very much. It's been a privilege to be here with you.
Dale, that was beautiful. Mortality awareness. How can we become an elder if we're in denial of death? Mortality awareness is so key, and working with the dying, whether it's a family member or in a hospice, whatever form it takes, is a practice. And it seems to me that what you said about meditation and mantra and the way that our practices evolve from I, thou, the soul and the beloved, to the recognition that it is within us, to the deeper recognition that it's in everything, is really what we're talking, right on what I wanted to talk about today, right on spot. So thank you, Dale. So I'm going to introduce now Robert Thurman to give us the perspective of Tibetan Buddhism. Dr. Thurman is a professor of Indo-Tibetan Buddhist Studies in the Department of Religion at Columbia. He's president of Tibet House, a nonprofit dedicated to the preservation of Tibetan civilization, and president of the American Institute of Buddhist Studies. He was the first Westerner ordained as a monk by the Dalai Lama, and he's the author of many books. I can't list them all here, but The Central Philosophy of Tibet, Circling the Sacred Mountain, Essential Tibetan Buddhism, Tibetan Book of the Dead, Wisdom and Compassion, Infinite Life, The Jewel of Tibet, and with Sharon Salzberg, Love Your Enemies. Robert, look forward to hearing from you.
Hi, Connie, thank you. And thank you to Jim and Joan and Robert and Dale for wonderful journeys we just went with them, dealing with this issue of aging, and extraordinary truths that they shared with us. Joan also mentioned about having just been with Dalai Lama in Dharamsala, His Holiness, where I was also with her there. And he's 87. I'm just 81. We all sort of seem to be around near there. He's ahead of us at 87. And all he wanted to talk about was warm-heartedness. People were asking him different questions and this and that, but he didn't want to listen to it much. He just wanted to talk about warm-heartedness. And he wants to see even young people in their education, he feels they should be taught about the supreme value of warm-heartedness. Of course, compassion and whatever, but he kept referring to it as warm-heartedness. The way he said it was so nice. And talking about the midst of the difficulties, of course, there are so many difficulties. A friend of my wife's recently gave me a mantra that I say all the time about how the 80s are not for sissies. And I think we all know that. And I had also put on my list of what to share with you is what are called the 3 roots of meditating on death, which actually is the way not to get all freaked out, but is the way to cheer yourself up. That's the key thing. Knowing about death cheers you up. You know, the power of now, everyone knows about that who has our dear reincarnation of Meister Eckhart Tolle. He's been drumming that into our heads for some years, very fruitfully. But actually, the real way to get into the power of now, that he was gently and delicately, maybe not pushing so hard, but it is to be aware of death, to bring death right onto your shoulder, where you know right away at every minute you could die. That's really critical. And they're said to be the Tibetan tradition coming from India, from what they consider the Holy Land of India, is 3 roots, they call it. And first is the certainty that you're going to die. And we think well, I know that, you know, I've always known that, so we will immediately say to ourselves, but actually the idea is that we're dodging that, we're turning away from it. Actually, Dale mentioned that very well. We kind of, and Robert both, we kind of try to hide that from ourselves. We act like next week and next month and next year and whatever it is, and you know, hope to make it to 100. My grandfather was very bent on that. He only reached 97, but he was very proud of that. But so certainty we're going to die, really rub it into ourselves. And then that route, I'm sorry, my watch always wants me to repeat things to get more clarity. Second route is uncertainty when it will happen. I love Robert's thing about 43 seconds to instant pulverization in that particular, those poor people in their kimonos and their wooden and bamboo houses in Hiroshima. And but it could be any second, you know, we could have any minute, and we never know. And therefore, live every moment, aging or not, as if it is the last. That's kind of our yoga. In other words, we're here, but we could not be here. So where we are, we don't really know where we are. We think we know, but at this age, we should be able to know that another time we'll realize things were different than we thought they were when we were there. So that's the second route. And the third route is when we go, what is it that we take with us? We do not take our coarse body. We do not take our clothes. We do not take our house. We do not take our relationships with the people. We do not take any of these things that we spend all our time cultivating and dealing with. What we do take is love, as they said, rightly, and our openness to love, perhaps you could say. And here Buddha made a great gift to us. which he did not do to make us a Buddhist, by the way. So there's no need to be a Buddhist or a Christian or whatever it is if you're not that already. Dalai Lama is very firm about he never, ever shared Buddhist wisdom with a motive of making somebody else a Buddhist, converting them. He thinks that's the wrong time in history. We're at a wonderful moment in the world, as horrible as it may look to us. We're at a wonderful moment where we've all realized that we're all here together. And therefore, we shouldn't be trying to dominate each other by making the other people share our views. So religions, institutions should give up trying to increase their market share. He's very firm about that, and he wants to enact that himself. So no need to be that. But Buddha's great gift, nevertheless, was a kind of scientific one. His third noble truth, nirvana, is the actual reality of life. Life is bliss, actually. It was his real teaching. And that's what the very devoted theist also says. Life is God. God is in everyone. God is everything. And then as they say that, then their own identity as a person melts, and any cultural concept that God speaks this language or lives only there or is only connected to that book or the other book, it melts away too. And it is the pure loving energy of the universe that is there to sustain everyone. In Buddhism, at the ultimate level, it's called the clear light of freedom, or the clear light of emptiness, the transparency, the infinite quiet energy that undergirds us all, and we are all made of, and actually is immanent in all of us. We're immersed in it all the time, whether we know it or not. But we don't know it when we're alienated, because we think we're something separate, and we hold the universe outside of ourselves. And when we do that, we're in a losing game, because we are so hugely interconnected with everything, and the bell is tolling for us. Everyone's bell is tolling for us. So there we are. And aging puts us in the time of doing that. But the other thing that goes with being in the moment, by realizing the imminence of death, and that life is this fragile, beautiful way of floating in the sea of death, and death is nothing but an introduction to the clear light of infinite love. So nothing to fear. So it's a matter of the great gift resonating back to us infinitely. But that then goes along with the preciousness of our human embodiment, which is the one among animals that can stop to think about all these things, from the sort of tendency of the separated being, the alienated being, to want to just consume what is in front of it and repel what seems to be consuming it. To realize that we are all one with everyone. And from that, the true warm-heartedness is the nature of the universe flowing through the open heart. It isn't sort of ours to originate. It's ours to open to. So the great gift is that there is no death, actually, and that we will be here to care for each other in some form or another, endlessly and infinitely. We all already are responsible to continue our relationships with all of our people. And it could be where we would not be in a good place to do that if we don't go out as a gift, if we don't become a reincarnated gift. And that's not a superstitious thing, it's a normal thing. It's nice if you think you're going to be nothing, because at least that means you can look forward to anesthesia, permanent, no pain. So that's nicer than feeling threatened by some cosmic ultimate reality. But it's kind of boring, and it's much better to be everything and to let go. Okay, you're ready and willing to be nothing, fine. But it is also important to realize you could be everything. And then the way to be everything becomes important, and that your love will be able to express itself for all the others that you are leaving behind. It gives you an important incentive to open your heart now, while aging, while not being a sissy, while being ready to give yourself at any time. So that the slogan I like to leave with is our duty as aging people is to exemplify for younger ones a true happiness and to try to see that happiness in them, even as crazy in situations as people get, even at the moment of their death and so on, even unjust and horrible death. But to see that happiness as the core of life and exemplify that so that we will be so happy at all times that even if something kills us, we will die happy. When we die happy, we sort of are giving ourselves to eternal life. And we're allowing God or the clear light, whatever we call it, to flow through us. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Connie,
Thank you,
and those
Robert.
who are yet to come in this wonderful dialogue.
Beautiful. Such a clear description of Tibetan Buddhist vision of practicing dying and practicing living. Thank you. Rabbi Mel, hello.
Hello.
Rabbi Mel Gottlieb served as president of the Academy of Jewish Religion, Los Angeles, until September last fall. He previously served as dean of the Rabbinical Chaplaincy School and interim dean of the Rabbinical School. He co-founded the Academy's initiative in interreligious studies with the Claremont School of Theology and the Islamic Center of Southern California. Let's see, there are lots of other accreditations here, but I'm going to move to Rabbi Gottlieb. Received a doctorate in mythology and depth psychology from Pacifica Graduate Institute and taught there in esoteric traditions such as Kabbalah. He's also the former director of Hillel at MIT and Princeton, and was a rabbi in Santa Monica and Westwood in Los Angeles. Hi, Rabbi Mel. I look forward to hearing about contemplative Judaism and the spiritual purpose of age.
Thank you so much, Connie, and thank you. Am I on the screen? Let's see. I don't see myself on the screen. Am I supposed to be doing something?
Yes, we can see you fine.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
So I'm just amazed and feel such a sense of gratitude to hear all the loving voices from everyone who spoke. And my tradition says, any way can be a way as long as you make it a way. Each of our traditions are so filled with teaching about love and truth and faith. And it's just a joy listening to you all. I'm just going to now focus on how Judaism speaks about honoring this elder, the sage, throughout its oral and written tradition. It emphasizes mindfulness and right action. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avot states that a 40-year-old attains understanding, a 50-year-old can offer counsel and guidance, a 60-year-old attains seniority and intellectual maturity, a 70-year-old attains a ripe old age, and an 80-year-old shows strength and abundance of soul. 40 is looked at as the minimum amount of years for ripening. The Jews were in the desert for 40 years before they reached a deeper understanding and gratitude. Moses was at Mount Sinai for 40 days, receiving the Torah. A fetus is declared a living being after 40 days in the Talmud. Saul, David, and Solomon reigned for 40 years. Noah's flood lasted 40 days. And the study of Kabbalah should begin at the age of 40, where the ego begins its quest to integrate greater soul consciousness. There's so many tales honoring the elder in our tradition. In the Bible, which is Jung calls the complexio oppositorum, filled with tribalistic and universal gems all mixed together. But there are two figures that stand out in terms of aging. One is Moses, the story of the burning bush in Exodus chapter 3, where he's walking along the way. And at this point in time, he's a very mindful, clear, concentrating, involved human being, and he walks along and he sees, turns aside. Many people may have walked in the same path and just not noticed it, but he was very alert and he saw this bush burning, and he realized this was a numinous event, a bush that was not consumed, and he felt the presence of God. Eya Shar Eya, I will be what I will be. God is no content. God is just a presence. As Jung said, we all use the word God, but we're all talking about a different God image. But his elder presence of clear consciousness enabled him to experience God not only that moment, but at every moment. And also the figure of Abraham also is talked about in our scripture in the same way. It says and Abraham, Genesis chapter 4, verse 1, when he was aging and coming closer to death, the verse says that Baba Yamim, he came into his days. It doesn't say he was old or aged. He came into his days, meaning that he was continuing to grow even at this stage of his life, constantly growing, still discovering, and amazed every day. Just as a child does not mean aging, just as a child, aging does not mean fading. It continues to mean growing in new ways. It's a transition, a time of change and interdependence, as all life is changed from one energy to another. The cycle of life, the cycle of changes. So aging and indeed death is just another transition. Am I still here?
You're fine, Mel.
Oh, I'm fine. Okay. So how does the Jewish tradition state how this state of consciousness from role to soul is achieved through the life cycle? Primarily through three paths: tefillah, which is meditation or prayer; two, study of Torah; and third, good deeds of kindness. The first path of prayer, meditation, is done 3 times a day, morning, afternoon, and evening. In the morning, we wake up with gratitude and recite prayers, thanking God for returning our souls and how beautiful is life. We recite it ideally with a group, imbibing and sharing interconnected energy with our fellows. This is a very powerful practice. Some prefer concentrating on each word and in each letter, the Hebrew letter. Let the letter enter you, just as words are shells to be unpacked. The Hebrew words are numinous. Their sounds, their shapes, their meanings. You let the word enter you with intense focus. And others, especially the Hasidim, have a practice of ecstatic meditation, dancing and singing to familiar melodies that arouse the soul. If you've ever been in a minyan, a happy minyan, where people are singing, enjoying, and spontaneously dancing, it's an experience of ecstatic meditation. And the second path is Torah study, where Torah means aura, means light, where the soul is aroused through spiritual teachings. For example, the sages ask, what is the most important verse in the entire Torah? Rabbi Akiva says, love your neighbor as yourself. And Ben Azai says, no, there's a verse that's even greater than this. And this is found in Genesis, chapter 1, verse 27. This is the creation of all humanity. Every human being is created in the image of God with love, Tselem Elohim. And the rabbis debated these two opinions, and they came to the conclusion that Ben Azai's opinion was greater than Rabbi Akiva, because Rabbi Akiva says, love your neighbor as yourself, love someone who is like you. Whereas Ben Azai says, every human being is created in the image of God. Accept difference, find the uniqueness, the beauty of every human being. The sages also asked the question, why was Adam created singularly? God could have created thousands of people at once. It's to teach us 4 things. One, the absolute value of each human being. If you kill one human being, it's as if you've destroyed the whole world. You save one human being. If you connect to one human being, you lift the soul and see the beauty in one human being, as if you've saved the whole world. Secondly, it's also to teach equality. No one could say, my father was greater than your father. We all come from Adam. thirdly, the uniqueness of each human being, created singularly with a unique destiny to bring to the world. And 4, to say, for my soul's sake alone was the world created, to imbibe joy from it, the spirit of beauty within the world, and also to be responsible to the world, to uplift the world with my deeds. But Torah study is not just an intellectual endeavor, it's an encounter with soul. The Kabbalists say that if you know how to read the Torah, you will see it is the full name of God. Let the letters enter your soul. Jacob had a dream when he was running away from Esau and he had to cross the river Yabok. He put his head down on a bunch of stones and put the stones under his head and created a big rock. And the Kabbalists say that the stones, each stone represented a letter. And when we're ready to hear the letters, we're ready to create a word. Our unconscious really reveals the truth to us when we're ready for it. Jacob was ready at that time. He was growing into himself, and his name became changed from Jacob to Israel. Israel means either one who sings to God, or one who wrestles with God, or one who does the right things. So our dreams inform us when we're ready, and usually later in life, we are ready to hear the secrets of the universe. There's a story of the great sage, the Rif, when a prominent student came to him and told him that he just went through the whole Talmud and expected praise. The Rif responded, but how much of the Talmud went through you? The study of Torah is an encounter with soul. Words are eggs, as Lockhart wrote beautifully. We have to open up, crack them open, and let them enter you and teach you and be
Mel?
ready. Yes.
Mel, forgive me for interrupting.
Sorry.
We have another speaker, so I want to ask you to be aware of the time.
Okay, I'm going to end now. So the third path is the path of good deeds, which is accomplished by carrying out the commandments, the mitzvot. The word mitzvah actually does not mean commandment or good deed. It means to join through the deed with proper intent. The soul within is joined to the soul of the universe. The Kabbalists concentrated intently before every mitzvah, doing it as an act of unifying the universe in the soul connection. So it becomes more than just a good deed, but a deed of connection to the connection and unification of the universe. So I will end here just with the word the theme is to show how our soul is developed through the life cycle, and we come to integrate ego with soul and bring our beauty to the world. And aging is just a transition to this beautiful state.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to introduce Roshi Pat. Hi. So I thought we would open with Zen and close with Zen. So Roshi Pat Enkyo O'Hara is abbot of the village Zendo in downtown Manhattan. A Soto Zen priest and contemporary American Zen teacher, she integrates traditional meditation and koan practice with social engagement and peacemaking, as Roshi Joan was talking about. Maybe you were also trained by Bernie. Yes, okay. A founding teacher of the Zen Peacemaker Order, she taught for many years at New York University's Tisch School of the Arts, centering on social issues and media. Roshi's writing appears in contemporary Buddhist journals, as well as in her books, Most Intimate, A Zen Approach to Life's Challenges, and A Little Bit of Zen. Mel, would you turn off your camera, and I will do the same. Thank you, Roshi Pat.
Oh, thank you, Connie, for bringing us together today. You know, I'm just seeing your black screen. Is that right? Hello?
You're not seeing yourself?
No.
Okay, Georg, I think Mel had the same situation. Georg, is that correct?
I guess it's all right. I can go ahead without seeing myself.
Okay.
You can hear me.
We can hear you. and
We can see you. We can see you.
We can see and we can hear.
Yeah, we can see and we can hear. So
So it's very
Proceed.
strange. I will proceed. I just wanted to express my appreciation to Connie for bringing us together. It's just such a beautiful time for us to look at these spiritual traditions. And I just loved what I heard today. But the way Connie talks about it, how to move from role, what we do, how we present ourselves to the world, to soul, who we really are now, and embodying our life's being as it is right now. I think it's very powerful, a powerful way to look at it, because there are so many vital roles for us in a lifetime. We shift from student to teacher, from child to parent to grandparent, from beginner to expert, and back to beginner again. Often our roles simply show up in our lives, as we step forward, willing to serve, to do something. As Connie said, I actually, Joan Roshi and I are Dharma sisters, and I am a Zen Buddhist, and I've practiced most of my life in the Zen Buddhist tradition. And as Joan Roshi said, we emphasize service, caring, and protecting life. In fact, that's how we see the work of life. It's our role to serve with our gifts and our energies, whether that's giving a lecture or showing up at a demonstration or a protest or cooking and sweeping a floor. It's all seen as service, giving back to the whole. And when I think of my own life and my own practice of Zen Buddhism, I realize I've often had to stop and ask myself, who is here now? How can she best serve? In other words, what's my role at this point in my life? What's my role? And I realize now I'm 80. The question has shifted. Thanks a bit to Connie's fine book. So shifted to appreciating each moment and finding myself in what Connie is calling our soul. How I am right now, showing up and being present for how I am at this very moment. And as a Zen person, I would call that my true self, or simply responding to reality as it flows through me. We think of the moment to moment shifting in time, how our perceptions change and are shaped by the time that's flowing through us, whether we realize it or not. So how do we meet ourself, our aging self? How do we meet our 80-year-old self right now? Not last year's self, not next decade's self, but now. The Zen Buddhist sense of self rejects any fixed position in space or time, and instead focuses on that flow of awareness, moment to moment. I think of the great master Zen Dogen, who wrote of the self, to study the way is to study the self. So that gives the intimacy of our spiritual practice and ourself. They're not two. To study the self is to forget the self. And to forget the self is to be enlightened by the 10,000 things. So Dogen teaches first that in order to be one with our spirituality, we must know ourselves. To study the way, to study the spiritual practice is to study the self. We must pay attention to the flow of our being. And that's such a powerful injunction, being asked to continually pay attention to the self in each moment. So how do we do that? How do we study the self that is constantly changing? Is it last decade's self that we're thinking about? Or is it this moment? I think that's the most significant thing for us as we age, our changing self. So Dogen tells us to study the self is to forget the self. Drop all the notions, all the fixed ideas, and see what's left. See what's here now. And then he says to forget the self is to be enlightened by everything, by the 10,000 things. Imagine being so open that we can truly experience the wholeness of life. I hear that in everyone that has spoken today. Being open and experiencing the wholeness of life. And I would say that that is what Connie is talking about in the shift to soul. When soul is here, we're awakened by everything. And thus we can give ourselves freely because we recognize there's no solid separation of self and other at that point. We are the trees, we are the ocean, we are each and every aspect of life. So we can say with that wonderful Japanese Zen poet, Ryokan, as my legacy, what can I give? Maple leaves in the autumn and a cuckoo sound in the summer. Such a generous thought. It's as if he's saying, I am part of everything, and I just give it to you. Rather than holding on to what we think we are or think we have, we can give it. We can give it all. And as we age, we can give it all. We become so generous as we age. That is the function of meeting our lives as it shifts, and our life as it shifts and offers something to the world. You know, it's not just Zen. I think of the great poet Walt Whitman, who wrote about his future death when he was quite old. He said, I bequeath myself to the dirt to grow from the grass. I love. If you want me to look for you, look for me under your boot soles. If you want me again, look for me under your boot soles. He's giving himself to the earth itself. When we allow ourselves to let go of our roles, it's easy to give because we're no longer grasping for that old role, for that old idea of self. So that's my understanding of the aging self. As we grow old, we can allow ourselves to recognize our identity with all that is. It's the generosity that Joan Roshi was talking about. All that is we can offer as parts of the whole, as maple leaves, as dirt and grass, and the sound of an autumn bird. Indeed, the very soul that Connie evokes no longer needs a specific role, because the soul is also the wholeness of life itself. So that's my understanding of Zen in my aging life. Thanks.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Pat. I really, really appreciate that. So everyone can come on camera. Jim, you're welcome to join us. And we're going to go a little bit longer. We'll go over the time because I'm eager to hear from everyone. And Robert, are you there?
Yes.
Robert Thurman.
Oh,
I mean,
There you are.
there
Hi.
I am. Hi, everybody. Wow, what an event.
So
Thank you, Connie, so much.
your comments, your
Thank you.
questions, any practice. There were a lot of practices hidden in your messages. Would anyone like to bring them out and make them more explicit?
I'd like to hear more shakuhachi.
But we could close with that. Should we close with that?
Yes, that'd be great.
Okay. How about a few more words before the music?
I have just a question maybe to get things rolling. I was struck, Bob, about your account of the Dalai Lama, 87 years old,
Yes.
wise and experienced, beyond measure in a certain fundamental way. And as he's nearing his transition, he's speaking about warm-heartedness.
Yes.
That feels to me such almost an innocent, simple
Yes.
observation and teaching at this particular moment in time, in the midst of all of the complexities and the challenges. I wonder if you and maybe others could just speak about the power of warm-heartedness as we age, because that seems to me to be a common universal denominator.
Yes. Yes, it is. Well, he was a little bit shocking, actually, His Holiness. When I first met him in a meeting a couple of days before your meeting, Joan, I was there with Thupten Jimba's Compassion Institute group. And that was the first time he saw me. And I think he wasn't aware that I was going to be there because I wasn't originally part of that group. But Jimba asked me to join them. And then he suddenly said, "We're going to still be working together life after life." And, on one hand, I was, overwhelmed with joy to feel embraced by him, and did embrace him and embraced me. But on the other hand, I was a little freaked out because I thought, does that mean he's checking out and we'll have to get back to it next life? And so then I had to urge him, to remind him that he had promised another 20 years just to hang out and try to not give up. He has been, 70 years observing his own people's genocide. So the lady who said he wasn't down there in the trenches with people because he wasn't physically there was not, of course, aware of his expanded sensitivity about his people, which is huge, for sure. I've seen him weep and so on. But he always says that compassion makes him, when he feels overwhelmed by the agony of whatever is impinging on him, he says compassion saves him from becoming ultimately depressed. And what he means by that, I think, is a weird thing about compassion, where he thinks about so many other people who are suffering and being starving and being killed and being destroyed. And then his own gets smaller and smaller, and even his own people's issue gets smaller and smaller. And then somehow the vastness of it forces him to bring up the deeper joy, to open to the deeper joy of reality itself. And that's where his faith and his trust in the clear light, in God, what others are calling God, but not sort of person, but also not excluding all the persons, all peoples, all cultures, personification of the deepest reality of the love of the universe, loved by the universe for all life. So but what was shocking about him was some people asked him in the previous meeting, "Well, Your Holiness, do you have some hope about the climate? We'll be able to deal with it and this terrible situation the planet is in." And he said, "Oh yes." He said, "We have 20 more years. We can all get along really well with each other, and after that, it's out of our control." He said, and it reminded me of Greta Thunberg, who at the latest COP just went blah, 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 because nobody is really doing it, they're not turning the switches, they're not actually dealing with the emergency. So later, after that, people asked me for interpretation. They were so shocked. I mean, he didn't hold up and, "Oh yeah, we'll make it. Oh, I'm sure we'll manage." He didn't do that. He just said, after 20 years, it's out of our hands, referring to his knowledge of tipping points, what he's learned. And so I took it, he does tell the young. He wrote a book with a French woman interviewing him, and, that to the young, to rebel if they have to, that they should, tell the older people to get on it, let's not have another war in between. So we have to turn up the fossil fuel thing. So anyway, I woke up in jet lag, Joan, like you, about 4:30 the day before yesterday, remembering that moment with the Dalai Lama and feeling really bad and discouraged, as we're also looking at this critical election in the US here. And but then I turned on Yuval Noah Harari,
Yeah.
his little TED talk about how it only takes 2% of global GDP being diverted to serious climate remediation right now, and then it's fine. And he mentioned how 4 or 5% was diverted for COVID. So it's very, politicians can do it. I mean, worldwide. I don't mean just in America. I mean worldwide. And the yearly subsidy to the oil industries worldwide is 4 or 5% of world GDP. That's the subsidy before we buy the stuff back from them. We give them ahead of time, hundreds of billions.
Robert, can I add something? Can I add something?
So anyway, that cheered me. All I want to say is just that cheered me up a lot, that we could do it any minute. You know? So I told people, I think Dalai Lama is not holding out some superficial hope that people can keep chit-chatting, you know, and somebody is going to do it maybe in the 2030s. I guess we can't make it 2020s, 2030s. We can't go on like that, because I think he's saying in his age, we have to, it has to be now. Now is now. I'm sorry. Yes, Robert, I apologize.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. No, I just want to thank you for bringing up the climate issue, because in about, as soon as we leave here, I'm going out to, in Northampton here in Massachusetts, to the Bank of America, where we're organizing a protest, because Bank of America is one of 4 banks in the United States that are the major funders of the fossil fuel companies. If they would withdraw their support of fossil fuels, it would dramatically change this whole situation. And these are people of faith, primarily in the Abrahamic traditions, but we'll be singing and we will be maybe dancing if we can find room on the sidewalk.
So for anyone,
could you sing a loving song to Lee Raymond? Do you know who he is?
No.
He's the guy in that bank who won't let them do it.
Lee
He's the
Raymond.
former chairman of Exxon.
So for anyone interested in this, you can go to thirdact.org and take the pledge to move your resources out of the 4 bad banks that are funding fossil fuels.
Yeah.
It's a really powerful thing to do.
Yes.
I want to just come back to warm-heartedness.
Yes.
So here we are talking about the climate crisis. How do we maintain warm-heartedness in the face of the head of Exxon or the head of B of A? It's not a simple task.
Yes.
It's a level of awareness that we cultivate with practice.
Absolutely.
And it sounds to me like a profound antidote to all of the projection, all the shadow projection and division and hatred and rage that we see every day in the headlines. So I just wanted to come back to that and kind of see if we can offer people practices to take home with them.
Yes, Connie, you know, I was just made me think about, you know, Joan beautifully brought up about equanimity.
Yes.
And the Dalai Lama's equanimity in dealing with the challenge that she mentioned. And the thing is, I think maybe the part of the equanimity is when confronted by the enemy, that a person who has real equanimity realizes they have all the negativity and the shadow that the enemy is manifesting, but they're choosing not to manifest it, but they realize the equality. So that makes them still have affection for even the nasty man who is destroying the Ukraine and threatening us all with nuclear weapons. And we have that ego level. And an equanimity person admits to themselves that they have that.
Beautiful. Shadow work and spiritual practice. Yes.
He feels his equality. He doesn't feel higher than the people who are manifesting badly. He feels that somehow he's the same with them too. It's just, but of course, he is making a different choice. Totally, 100%. That's the shadow embrace that you talk about.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob.
Joan, is there anything you want to add?
I just want to go back to what His Holiness said at the end of the interaction with Rowan. And that was the intentional cultivation of altruism and bodhicitta, you know, living with this sensibility of, you know, my life is really about how do I benefit others and to be intentional about it. And also, Bob, you know, I think Rowan, many of us heard Rowan deeply. You know, he was speaking for the younger generation who are out there, you know, in the immediate landscape of suffering, But as you said, His Holiness, of course, he lost his nation and had lost so much in the continual loss in Tibet in relation to the depredations foisted by China. Touch him deeply. And the thing you feel is he is undeterred. He continues. He does not lose the thread of altruism.
Yes.
And I think that is really essential. I wrote recently, there's no reason to peddle futility in the world right now.
Yes.
It's just, it's a no exit strategy. And what we have to do is to, what His Holiness said, is to resource ourselves. And I think as elders, I so appreciate, and I know many of you and just met a few of you today, but it's not as if we're sitting in our rocking chairs. Hardly. I use Joanna Macy as a kind of role model in her 90s, showing up, sending her voice. And even with the diminishment of her capacity to hear and other things, she's in a certain way unstoppable. And even after her body drops off, her Dharma will continue, just like His Holiness's Dharma will continue. And may the good teachings of all continue.
Beautifully put.
Right.
Beautifully put.
I just want to say also, I hadn't seen Jim for decades, and I'm just so astounded at the way you look. It's so marvelous.
Isn't he beautiful?
Are you
He's
also 80?
radiant.
Are you also in your 80s?
I'm 71. I'm a mere
youngster.
A
babe.
baby.
And
Wonderful hair.
Jen,
And by the way, I just want you to know, Joan, that you received a lot of compliments which people were maybe shy to share with you, because we expect to see you as a Roshi with the shaved head, but seeing your lovely white hair was something really marvelous. So we hadn't seen you in a long time, and there was Joan. I didn't think it was you first. Who is that with the mind? Oh no, that is you.
You know what
She has this
Mathieu
wonderful
called it?
hair.
He called it retreat hair because I was in the mountains for 2.5 years and there's no plumbing up there. So, shaving my head became not possible.
Well,
Aikyo knows it. And I just thought, well, just keep it. I'm old. Just keep it. It's too much trouble to shave that head. What the heck? There are certain things, permissions that one realizes when you pass a threshold in age.
No more shoulds.
More shoulds. Well, that might be a good place to end our program today, everyone, on this light note, but a light note of deep gravity.
Yes.
About our time, that we need to honor the commitment that I think each human being has to each other and our earth, to be compassionate and warm-hearted and to live from
and
that
to orient to a vow that has meaning for you as you move toward life completion. This is really, really important. I want to offer 2 more invitations as I've closed each day of our event. Also, Jim, you have a big climate event coming up. You might want to plug that. But let me just offer these invitations for people who would like to read The Inner Work of Age together. There are free online groups. There are about 50 of them now. I'm calling them Wisdom Circles. And do the practices. The book is full of practices. You can do them in community this way. You can do that by shooting me an email, conniezweig@gmail.com, and just put Wisdom Circle in the subject line. Please don't send me a long story. Just put Wisdom Circle, and I will connect you with other people as these groups are forming. Some of them have lasted more than a year now. People are forming deep friendships. And the other invitation is to an online conference, The Inner Work of Age, Becoming a Good Ancestor, December 2nd through 4th. It's also online. The keynote speakers are Ken Wilber, Jean Shinoda Bolin, Bill McKibben, and many other wonderful speakers. You can get continuing ed credits for this one. And that, I'll just put this in the chat. You can find that at retreat.pacifica.edu. And you can check it out and see if that's of interest to you. Thank you all so much
Thank
for
you.
coming.
I would like to, could I especially thank Rabbi Mel? I'm
Yes.
so happy to have your input, Rabbi. And I just want to convey His Holiness the Dalai Lama is so appreciative of your tradition in that setting an example of keeping this beautiful spiritual culture alive in exile for so long.
Thank
And
you,
he's
Bob.
looking to where Tibet has to do that. And he feels a doubt sometimes that they'll be able to. So he's deeply grateful. He loves your
Thank you.
tradition,
Thank you, Bob.
especially, and I do too.
And Jim, let's
Good.
talk about the climate event.
Yes, and but we're going to end, Bob, you're going to do a little bit on the flute as an ending. That would be a
Jonas.
beautiful ending, but let me just say that next week, on Monday, we're doing something quite extraordinary on Humanity Rising. We're having a global meditation and intention around the 40th death day anniversary of Mahsa Amini, the young 22-year-old Iranian woman that was beaten to death by the morality police. And as you all know, caused a global sensation. It was similar. It was a George Floyd event, but for the Iranian people and the Iranian women. And we've been working with young women in Iran who requested that the one thing we could do would be to convene a global meditation. So we have Marianne Williamson, we've got Lynn McTaggart, who will be creating an intention around supporting the revolutionary movement there in Iran, which is the most intense that they've had in the 44 years since the Islamic fundamentalists seized control. So there's a whole 1 week program that we're going to be convening around Iran, starting with this global meditation. And then the following 2 weeks, we're dedicating, as Connie said, to the Conference of Parties that is taking place in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. And we have people that are going to be there, like Bill McKibben and others, who will be speaking to us live from Sharm el-Sheikh. We also have a network of youth activists in over 23 countries that will be talking to us about climate activism. And one thing that I would just comment on is that I think the conclusion that came out of COP26 last year in Glasgow was that we can no longer rely on the governments to solve this problem. We can no longer rely on the corporate sector to solve this problem. And I think the progressives and the ecologists that are going into COP27 in Egypt in 10 days are in that moment where the appeals to the governments are so empty that, as Greta said, Bob had mentioned it a few minutes ago, it's all blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So in that situation, like this discussion we've been having around aging, we're at a moment in history where it is the people, it's us as individuals, it's us in community that really have to take ownership of the moment. And whether it's our own aging, we can't rely on a government or any kind of institution to ease us through to the other side. Climate change. And that's really at the heart of what Humanity Rising is trying to do, is really empower people in any way we can to take the kind of actions, both internally and collectively, both to fortify ourselves, but also to take advantage of all the opportunities out there for how we can work together at this critical moment in history. So I just want to thank you, Connie, for bringing this incredible group together, and let you all know that week by week on our global broadcasts, we're keeping up with unfolding events and trying to bring inspiration so that humanity can indeed rise. So in that spirit, Robert, why don't you give us a moment on the flute and we'll bring the session to a close.
I love that.
You have to unmute.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, I want to just touch this word love as I play this song. When Jesus knew that he was going to die, and he died pretty early, 31, maybe 32, he already knew what mattered most. And he said, when I go, just know that I'm don't call me teacher anymore, call me friend. So to create these friendship networks that are needed for this moment in history is absolutely critically important. And so this love, and the love that grew out of the Black gospel tradition influenced one of my favorite singers from the 50s, and here he is.
Thank you, everyone. Bye for now.
Let's fall in love.
Fall in love.
Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, everyone.